This program was first broadcast on Canterbury's access media station, Plains FM, and was made with the assistance of New Zealand On Air.
Hello and welcome to Breaking Ground, a podcast about earth-moving machinery and characters in the industry. Both your hosts work for Terra, New Zealand's cat machinery dealer. I'm Richard Clark.
And I'm Marty Turek. In this podcast we hear stories from a wide range of people, and today we're lucky to have Road Metals Managing Director Murray Francis with us. He's someone who we've been wanting to have on our podcast since we started. We're looking forward to him sharing a few stories from years gone by, and it's a pleasure to have him in the studio. Welcome, Murray.
Thank you, Marty and Richard.
So, Murray, tell us a bit of your background and your formative years growing up in the industry.
Well, I've been around the industry for a very long time. North Otago Road Metal was started by my father back in 1955. So, again, I've been involved with the industry all my life. Probably started... rode around in the trucks, as I say, when I was young. Actually, apparently, I was with my father in a bassinet on the truck. My mother couldn't handle two children at once, so my father used to take me. But apart from that, I suppose I started driving or operating loaders and trucks probably from the age of 9, 10 in pits. I was driving trucks on the road, again, illegally, probably when I was 14, 15. So I've been in the industry for a very, very long time, and I'd have to say, if you ask me what's the most important thing that's ever happened to me, my wife, I should be telling her, was when I got married, but it was actually when I got my heavy traffic licence. I've been looking forward to it from the age of probably 7 or 8. And when I officially got my heavy traffic licence, it was a huge day for me. I was so excited. 18 years old, so I drove a truck around the block of an Arctic, so I got my truck and trailer all in one hit, unlike what they have to do today. And then the traffic cop got me to hop on the front end loader. He decided not to stand on the steps with me, but told me where to go and looked at where I went, and when he came back he said, yes, you've passed. So again, I was 18, so I got the whole lot at one.
Nice. So you sort of mentioned North Otago Road Metals. Obviously, we've seen a change now to Road Metals. What sort of brought that change around, and talk us through the sort of, I suppose, the growth of the company?
Well, yes, North Otago Road Metal was a well-known company, again, formed in 1955. When my father died, Stan Francis, when he died, we ran the companies together. There was 3 companies. There was North Otago Road Metal, which was an aggregate producing company, although we used to do a bit of road building. Then we got into coal mines and then formed another company called Francis Mining, worked down at Nightcaps, and then eventually bought a mine over in Reefton, so that was Francis Mining, but originally it was under North Otago Road Metal. And then we bought out Burnett's and Timaru, and it was Burnett Construction, well, it was Hamilton Cartwright, then it was Burnett's, and then it became Francis Construction. So I still work with North Otago Road Metal, but when we moved Francis Construction to Christchurch, I became the general manager and ran it from up here.
So you sort of touched on a few things with mining and things like that. So what's the first project that you remember and the first project that you remember being involved with?
Well, the first project that I was really involved with was probably, we did 6K of overlay, first coat seal on the Linders Pass. And I drove a loader, front end loader. I just left school, actually I just sat my UE. And my father picked me up from the exam. I said it'll only be a couple of hours. He was outside waiting, took me up to the Linders and hopped onto a loader. And I was there for, 4 months, I think, in the middle of summer. And we got a lot of the gravel on site out of the river, and we carted some from Amarama. But I was on the front end loader working a screening plant in the river at Morven Hills it was. And so that was my first project. And I operated a front end loader for a year, and then when I got my heavy traffic, which was pretty exciting, I still stayed on the loader for a while and then went onto a truck. And so that was the start of my career.
Can you remember what that truck was and what that loader was back at the time?
Certainly can. How could I possibly forget? The truck that I went for a heavy traffic licence was a Dodge, an old Q Dodge, LAD Dodge, with a tipulator on, so that covered me for the truck and trailer. But then the loader I went on to was a Michigan loader, pivot steer. That was on the Linders, so I operated that for a long time. But what happened, when we weren't so busy, the truckies would load themselves, and I was quite fussy about who was operating it, because I had sheepskins in it and stereos, and so I didn't like too many people fiddling around with it. But anyway, so I operated the loader for a while, and then we must have been doing a job, and every time Dick and Harry was on the loader, I was pretty upset about it, so I said to my father, I need to go to a truck. So the first truck I actually drove permanently was a Ford D800. Oh. Yeah, so I was on that for probably about 6 months, and then I was offered a job on the Leyland Octopus, which was an 8-wheeler towing a trailer. I thought I was on cloud 9. So it was a great truck to drive. Most of our trucks in those days were 6-yarders, and this was a 21-yarder, so it was one of the biggest trucks we'd had. So my father didn't think I was experienced enough to go onto it, but our foreman at the time said yes, he's experienced, and give him a go on it. They weren't disappointed in my dad.
Oh, fantastic! And I suppose moving forward from that, you have worked on some of New Zealand's largest projects. What's been, I suppose, one of the big highlights, and why?
Actually, I've worked on some amazing projects. I remember when I was on the Leyland Octopus, I was told that I was going down to Manapori, well, actually Waiau River, but it was to build a weir. The river had dropped down, and I was told that the truck was going down on a barge, and I'd be going to work every morning on the jet boat. So I was so excited. I told all my friends, I said, guess what, I've got a job, and we're going to work on the jet boat every morning and coming home on the jet boat, because there was no access by road.
Yes.
So I was pretty excited about the whole thing, but when we got down there, it was anything but exciting. We put the truck onto a barge, and we went down to, I'm trying to think of the name of the place, I can't think, but anyway, it was on the Waiau River. Anyway, going to work on the jet boat wasn't much fun, because we were leaving at 6 o'clock in the morning, middle of winter, a couple of feet of snow around, and it wasn't much fun. I wondered when we first got the jet boat why we all handed out these big coats. It was to keep warm, and we were all huddled up underneath the dash as we were heading down the river. And I remember one time, because the river, we had to put a weir up, the river was getting lower and lower, and the Ministry of Works supplied the jet boat. Anyway, I was huddled up underneath the dash, because by God it was cold, and it was dark. It was still dark at that time of day as well. So I huddled up, and next is a scrape and a crunch and a crash. I thought, holy shit, what the hell's happened now? We'd beached the thing. And anyway, so the others all hopped out, clothes and all, overalls on, great coats, just jumped out, taking the boot, and didn't even take the boots off. I'm sitting there taking my boots off and undoing the belt to take my jeans off. I'm not going to bloody get wet. Well, I was going to get wet, but why get the clothes wet? So anyway, they were saying, come on, Murray, get out of that bloody boat. I said, just hang on, I'm taking my jeans off and my boots off and my socks off. So I did all that. Then we hopped out. But they were on the water waiting for me. Silly buggers. Anyway, we pushed the boat off. And when we got onto dry land, I put the jeans back on, the socks back on, because we didn't have heaters in the trucks in those days. So I was quite warm all day, but the others, didn't end up with pneumonia, but most of them had colds. So I said, actually, I wasn't so silly after all. Why didn't you just do what I did? So anyway, that was an interesting project down there. Probably the next interesting one, we went into Haast. We did all the site works for the DB Haast. That was an interesting project. Down in Oamaru, it's a very conservative place, my hometown. Actually, they did have prohibition for a while, so people had to go out of the province to drink. But anyway, when I went there, they were pretty tough. I used to go to the dances, I was young and that, and no alcohol allowed. When I went to Haast, because I couldn't believe it, the policeman's there, and he's on the chocolate wheel raffling off booze. I mean, it was just, and I thought, this is the best place in the world to be. Loved it, absolutely loved working at Haast. But talking about the big projects, probably did a lot of work at Haast, did a lot of work down at Manapori, Tiania Way, Milford Sound, worked in at Milford Sound. That was an interesting thing. But the biggest, talk about a project, would be Twizel and the Upper Waitaki scheme. So I worked there for a while. We supplied, I think it was 750,000 tonnes of filter sand. And we had our plant set up at Twizel, and we carried up to Tekapo A, Tekapo B, and then Pukaki, and then Ohau. So we supplied all the filter sand which went underneath the canal as a drainage. So and we had bottom dumps in those days. With all trucks, when you bought trucks, there was a sales tax on it. But so a lime spreader, I think you got 25. Well, your sales tax was it might have been 25% off. Anyway, it was to do with the sales tax. Bottom dumps then became the same thing. So we bought all these brand new trucks for the project with bottom dumps on them, and you should have seen the operators from Ministry of Works with the dozers. I mean, we were spreading the sand, and they had to push it up with the D8s. And they said, "Why can't you guys have tip trucks?" So it was all bottom dumps. Well, it wasn't all bottom dumps. We had the existing truck and trailer units. Actually, I was on a truck and trailer unit, but so we got the sales tax off. And interesting enough, after the job, after 3 years, because you had to have the bottom dump on for 3 years, same as a lime spreader. And when we sold them, no, we didn't. We sold a couple, and we actually got more money than what we paid for them because of the sales tax here. So it was a good deal. Also, interesting enough, I think we went for the Mack trucks, and they were very, very expensive. The Dodge and Fords that we used to be running, I think you could buy 4 of those to one of the Macks. Everyone said, "Why didn't you buy 12 Dodges or 12 Fords rather than the 4 Macks?" But it proved itself with the Macks. They were reliable. They never let us down. They're a bloody good truck. That was the old R series. The Macks aren't as good today, but they certainly were back then. They're a bloody good truck. And as I say, when we sold them, we got more than what we paid for them. So,
What about the Clyde Dam? Would have been one of the biggest, and you were heavily involved in that project. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, well, that was actually quite an interesting one because my father was in the New Zealand Contractors Federation. And after Twizel, I thought Twizel was well run. I mean, Max Smith was a great operator. He ran that job under budget, ahead of schedule. They called him God, and I can understand why. I mean, he ran with an iron. He was marvellous, but he was a tough person. But what I would say to you is that when Max made a decision or said something, that was it. He didn't have to go higher up. I think that's why the Ministry of Works were probably a bit scared of him, in all fairness, didn't want him back up there. But can I give you a couple of examples before I go to the Clyde Dam? We had we had our own single men's camp at Twizel, but we had 2 houses. So our manager who managed the scheme, Alan McDowell, he had one of the houses, and our mechanic had the other house. So that was in the Twizel township. When we finished the job, we left and we dispersed, went different areas. I think some of us went back to Oamaru, some of us went over to the Haas, different places. But anyway, the story is the 2 houses become vacant. Higgins Earth Moving, nothing to do with the Higgins in North Island, but Higgins I think they're from Southland originally. Actually, they're a very good company, very, very strong, looked after their gear. Anyway, they phoned up my father and they said, "Stan, you've got 2 houses available, empty. Could we rent them?" And my father said, yes, that'd be good. So they're available. Anyway, you wouldn't believe it. Max Smith phoned Stan up the next day. Yeah, he knew everything that was going on. And he said, "Stan," he said, "I understand you've got 2 spare houses in the township." My father said, "Yes, we have, Max," but he said, "I've just finished renting them." He said, "Well, actually, I've got staff that would actually quite like them, Stan." And my father said, "Well, actually, Max, it's too late." He said, "I've already rented them." He said, "It's not too late at all, Stan. They're on my land." And he said, "Here's the deal. If I can't have them, I'll give you 2 weeks to ship them off my land." So anyway, a deal was struck, and I think Higgins got one, and the Ministry of Works got the other one. But Max did rule with he was God. But it was good. You knew where you were with him. Yeah. Anyway, we've got off the subject.
Back at the Clyde Dam, yes.
Yeah, and with the Clyde Dam, it was interesting. I still think that the Ministry of Works had a great setup. That's where I was heading before. Ministry of Works was a great organisation. That's where we got a lot of their staff. They trained. They had a lot of apprentices. So your mechanics, your drivers, your operators. So Ministry of Works trained them. They also, with the Ministry of Works, everyone got a slice of the action. So at Twizel, for argument's sake, you had your Higgins, you had Burnett's, you had Mackay's, Butson's, there's companies, Baker's, of course. Jesus, they were big there. And I'm probably missing out another 3 or 4. But the point is, everyone got a slice of the action. It was great. It was run by Ministry of Works. It was all hourly hire, incidentally. But anyway, and also it was a design and build. So basically the engineers, as we were building Twizel and the canals, the engineers were in there still designing it. So it was great. But if it was private contract, you've got to bear in mind, there'd be extras, there'd be, but there was. Ministry X was a great setup. Anyway, I still think Max Smith should have got the job at Clyde Dam. But anyway, here's the deal, and this is what I was leading up to. My father was in the Contractors Federation, and there was a big thing that went out, construct by private contract. I can still remember the stickers were everywhere, construct by private contract. My father then got up to the Contractors Federation and said, well, if that happens, you're probably all going to miss out on an overseas consortium that comes in. And they all disagreed. They said, well, we've got a chance and we think it should be private contract, and we think there's a big waste at Twizel, which there wasn't, incidentally. I think it was well run. So anyway, my father resigned from the Contractors Federation because of it. He said, well, if that's the track you're going down, I don't want a bar of it. Because, again, my father was worried about not getting the sand and egg. That's what we wanted, was the sand and aggregate. So my father said, well, I'm resigning. So he resigned, and the ironical thing is, what he predicted was right. A overseas company, being Zublins, got the contract. Ministry X still did a part, but Zublins got the main part of the Clyde Dam. And they did bring their own aggregate plant in as well from Germany, which my father was quite upset about. He said, well, we've got 2 aggregate plants sitting here. We don't want a plant from Germany. So he then got it organised through the MP, the Waitaki MP at the time, that after the contract, that plant would have to leave New Zealand and go back to Germany. So that was good. So I suppose we had a bit of a win, but again, we didn't get the sand and egg. But we did get the sand and egg for Ministry of Works. So we're doing that. Zublins were then having trouble getting their sand and egg, and they're having a massive problem. So then they started buying from us, which was great, because we had the plant set up. Then my father, being a wee bit cheeky, said, look, rather than you're buying the stuff from us now, you're having a problem, can I buy the plant off you? So basically, because they're having problems, they sent people out. They then decided they would sell us the plant. So we actually bought the plant off Zublins. Then we had to hurriedly change the rule about it going back to Germany, of course, which we did. So we ended up... So again, ironical enough, here's my father who resigned from the Contractors Federation because construct by private contract, and guess who was one of the few contractors who got work? North Targa Road Middle. Yeah. And when we were doing that job, it was probably the biggest job we've done. I think 1985 and 86, I think it was. It was 2 years running, or was it 86, 87? Doesn't really matter. North Targa Road Middle was the single largest provider of aggregate for New Zealand. So, yeah.
And you did 3 million tonnes of sand and aggregate for that Clyde Dam.
We actually we processed 6 million tonnes to get 3.5 million tonnes. So basically, there's half the stuff we had to put back, of course.
Yes.
Yeah, because you're going for sand. Because it's the old gold tailings, we actually had to put a barmac in place to manufacture the sand. We had trouble with the sand, and that's where Zublins were going wrong. They couldn't get the sand. So they were asking for our advice, but I think that's when we said, well, the best advice we can give you is to sell us their plant, which happened eventually. So, we put a couple of barmacs in there. We manufactured the sand, because I say, again, it was out of the tailings. And, hey, the operation was very, very successful for us, exceptionally successful.
No, it definitely sounds like it. So we sort of touched on a couple of projects. Are there any other sort of, or what are some of the challenges that you sort of see around the projects? And can you tell us some more around the challenges? Obviously, that's a really good example with, the political piece coming through. But what are some other challenges that you've had on some of the projects that you've been working with?
We've had lots of challenges. I suppose actually one of the challenges was Manapori. We went into Manapori on the second tail race tunnel. We worked with Fletcher, Dillingham, Elbow. We produced all the shotcrete material. We had to take the gear in on barges. But you ask challenging, you can't just hop in the car and go down the street and get another electric motor, or you can't go and get some belting. So we had to stock up on stuff. So when we went into Manapori, we had 2 containers full of gear. Anything that we suspected might go wrong, we had in the containers. And again, actually, it was quite funny. I think one day I was heading into Manapori myself with the car, and there's no reception, cell phone reception on the Linders. But when I got to, I think, top of the Cluden Hill, not far from Terrace, I got a message that they had a breakdown and they didn't have the part, and could I turn around back to Oamaru? And I was a bit disappointed because I was trying to catch the boat goes at certain times. So anyway, I said yes. So a mechanic left Oamaru with the part that was required. I turned around and met him at I think Otamatata, Kuria, somewhere down that way. So I mean, I was certainly hopping along. We put the part in the boot of my car, turned around, went back, but the boat had gone, so we just hired a local jet boat. And he thought he was just taking myself and a suitcase over, but when I showed him the electric motor, we didn't even know how we're going to lift it into the boat. So anyway, we got there. So again, that was a challenge, but again, we enjoy challenges. And I suppose one of the things that we've really enjoyed with road metals is working in the remote areas. We've worked over at Haas. We've worked in areas that, how should I put it? I mean, mind you, there's no cell phones back then, but now I look at the young people, and I think there's one place we've worked at Boulder Creek between Haas and Fox Glacier. And one of the young guys said to me, "Murray, I've got no reception." I said, "And you're not going to get reception till you go back to Oamaru either." Yeah, he was devastated. What can I do? Can't get text messages. I said, no.
And those, I suppose, some of those challenging projects and places like that would be great for bringing the team together and on the jobs and just building that culture within those people as part of your business as well.
Well, again, what I always liked about it, and it's probably a little bit different now, but in my day, we lived together, we worked together, we played together. I can remember one situation we were working over at Haas at Paringa doing a bridge approach, and again, actually it's interesting, now we've got quite a few quarries around the place, but I'd say 30, 40 years ago, we never had any land-based quarries. All of our gravel extraction was out of rivers, the whole lot. Anyway, we're working out of the Paringa River over at Haas, and we were staying, where were we staying? We were staying at Lake Meraki Motels, and it just pissed down this particular night, absolutely hosed down. And when we were having a breakfast at 6 o'clock in the morning at the motels, I said to the guys, "Look, the river's going to be in flood, there's nothing surer." But I said, "We better go and have a look and make sure the gear's safe." So jumped in the car, drove there, and the river was bank to bank. But the rain was such, it was typical West Coast, the windscrew wipers couldn't even keep up. I mean, I think it was in a Falcon station wagon, the windscrew wipers just couldn't keep up. When we arrived there, it was bank to bank, the Paringa River. And we had a fuel tank, we probably had 8 tyres, spare tyres for the trucks, and we had drums of oil, of course, for the thing. So we had on this, and it was up on high ground. But I said to them, "Jesus, the water's just starting to lap it now." I said, "We're going to have to shift it up to higher ground." We thought it was on high ground, but I said, "We're in trouble." So I said to them, "Now here's the deal." I said, "You can all get out and put your wet weather gear on, but by the time you get out of the station wagon and put it on, you're going to be wet anyway." And I said, "It's a waste of time." I said, "Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get out, I'm going to take my clothes off and just strip down to the undies because we're going to get wet." And I said, "Then what you can do, it's going to take us a quarter of an hour to do this job. Then we'll go back to Paringa. We'll all have a hot shower, put some dry clothes on, and then we'll go to the pub." So they all thought that was a pretty good idea. So anyway, they all did the same as me, stripped down to the undies. So the guy that was the best was the guy in the front end loader. So he was there, he put the bucket up to actually it was a Cat 2, a Cat 980.
Yes,
so we're rolling the drums of oil into the bucket. It was pissing down. But what I didn't realise, one of the guys, and I'd forgotten, doesn't wear underpants. So he was up on top of the fuel tank. It was a 1,000-gallon skid tank, and he's directing the guy in the 980 with the teeth on. You see, we got the rope from either side.
Yes,
so he's directing the loader into pick up the fuel tank. And I thought, holy shit, what a sight. Anyway, then I looked at the bridge right beside us, and it was a trans tour bus. And it was stopped on the bridge, and there's all these loopies wiping the windows, looking out and pointing. I knew what they're looking at. You imagine 4 people in underpants rolling drums of oil and a guy naked guiding the loader in. And I would imagine those tourists are still talking about what they'd seen at Haas. They probably thought of dueling banjos or something. But anyway, it was quite humorous. But I suppose my point is, what I said to them, we're going to get wet, we'll go back, have a shower, and then we'll go to the Fox pub. And that's exactly what we did. Yeah. But we all worked together, we played together.
So we sort of touched on some of sort of older projects and stuff like that, what are some of the more major projects that you've sort of been involved with in recent times and things like that? And then how have you sort of found them to be quite different to obviously the way that some of the works projects were run, or some of the differences that you see?
I think, how should I put this? A lot of it that we used to work on was sort of design as build as we went type thing. Mm-hmm. Now, it's a lot more involved. It's a lot of overseas companies that will come and do it. I mean, we went up. Yeah, it is quite different in all fairness. I'm just trying to think. Resource consents is the biggest thing. Yeah. Resource consents, compliance issues with consents. When we get a consent to extract gravel, or say a riverbed, I say to our staff, act as if you've got the ECAM people staring at you, looking at you. Would you do what you're doing now if you've got the guys staring at you? And if the answer's no, don't do it. So again, compliance is a huge issue. Health and safety is a huge issue. I'm not saying we don't need health and safety, but I do think we're injuring more people now than what we ever have. I think we had a lot more common sense back in the day, and we looked out for each other as well. I think some of the fun's gone out of it, to be fair. I don't want to be too pessimistic, but we had a pretty good team. We had a lot of fun on the way past. And I mean, I had a person, health and safety manager, actually she was bloody good. She said that it's the best job she's ever had. She loved coming to work. She loved the team. And that's what it's about. It's about who you're working with. It's the team. We had a very, very strong team back then. I think we've still got a strong team, but probably not to the same extent as what we did have, if you know what I mean. I mean, we've got our manager in Central Otago, Jack Parker. He's been with the 50 years coming up this year. 50 years. Anyway, he's already had his gold watch, but I'll have to work out what I'm going to give him. Actually, when I gave him a plaque for his 40 year, quite funny, so that was 10 years ago, we had a bit of a function for Jack, his 40 year function. And a person went up to Jack, I was just standing not far away, and they said, Jesus, Jack, and they said, 40 years. He said, that's a long time. He said, he said, it wasn't exactly a hardship. He said, if it was a hardship, I would have off. Well, actually, I shouldn't have said that. We can edit that part out. It's okay. But yeah, he said it wasn't a hardship, I would have left. Yeah, and he said, I'm still enjoying it. Someone asked me the other day, when are you going to retire? I said, when I stop enjoying myself. I mean, again, enjoyment is... When we did our mission statement, we came up with all the usual stuff, to make a profit, to have a safe work environment. And I involved the staff. And then it got to the stage, I go, you're missing the most important thing. I said, and I try and feed, because I want them to come up with it. I don't want to write the thing. I need them to write it so they take ownership of it. Of course. Anyway, I said, why do you go to work? Because one bright spark, earn money. I guess. I mean, what else? Anyway, the guts of it is I finally got out of them to have fun in the workplace. And it became part of our mission statement to have fun in the workplace. I want people to want to come to work, and that's what it's important. Someone said to me, heck, when I talk about that guy, Jack Parker, who's done 50 years, I've done 52, we've got in the over 40 year club, I think we've got 8 people. So it's good, we've got a lot of experience, but now those people have started up for retirement, so we are going to have a massive gap coming up. I went to Waitaki Boys in Oamaru, and I took 4 of my classmates with me. So, yeah, pretty easy to have fun when you're doing that, isn't it? Oh well, you got to understand. When I was working, I'm actually working with my friends, and we only used to come home once a month. And when we did go home, half the time we didn't even make it. We called in somewhere, and that was it. And we travelled in our own time. We had a lot of fun. And there's nothing. As I said to someone a while ago, as someone said, would you make any changes? I said, absolutely not. There's not one single thing I'd change. I've had some tough times and some difficult times. I've rolled a truck over. But it's all character building. I wouldn't change a thing. I might have steered in a different direction, not rolled it, but anyway. Oh, that's fantastic. Now, moving, I suppose, into the machinery side of things a bit more. Road metals and wheel loaders, they go together. And you're well known for your loyalty to certain brands in your fleet. Yep.
Tell us about the long-term partnership with Caterpillar and Goff and Hamer, as it was back then.
This interview with Murray Francis has been split into two parts, with part 2 playing on July.